Nobody can hear me?
Debbie, can you hear him? Okay.
Sound check,
That's another
I
day.
can hear you.
Kinda.
Not through the
sound
speaker.
check.
Now you can.
Which one is?
How are you guys?
Test, 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 test.
That's you.
Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Don't go too long. I can't count that high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, he ran
6,
out of-
7, 8, 9, 10.
Now you gotta go to your toes.
I'll just talk loud. All right, 6 p.m. Call a meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consider the minutes of the meeting of April 3rd, 2018.
Move we accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Brenda?
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawks?
Aye.
Commissioner Nessler? Aye. Commissioner Hager?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Abstain. Discuss and review appropriation ordinance C 0331 TAC 18 and P 0406 TAC 18.
I just keep seeing that one number every time. Under that. You know which one I'm talking about too.
Well, I'm sure I do. I probably did too long.
Our insurance payment was due.
Yes. I saw that and bumped that up.
Yeah. Wow,
I was there.
you're paying a lot.
Nothing? Public forum?
No.
Nothing? Wow. All right. Additional agenda items. Then I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Brenda?
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawks?
Aye.
Commissioner Nessler? Aye. Commissioner Hager?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Consider proclamation for the Hope Center. The Hope Center 2018 Week of Emphasis Proclamation. Whereas it is a long-held value in American life and a strong Kansas tradition to support one's neighbors in times of need. Whereas ongoing efforts to balance state and federal budgets and the resulting changes in programs to assist those in need continue to call for more involvement from the private sector to provide support and assistance to individuals and families whose circumstances may at times leave them without basic needs as life as safe shelter, clothing, food, and medical care. Whereas the Hope Center was established in 1991 by persons from several organizations for our larger community to help our people in emergencies. Hope. Whereas the Hope Center has for 27 years brought together the resources of our community to serve our neighbors in times of need, seeking to fill the gaps between personal and family resources, assistance offered by government agencies, and aid available from other charitable organizations, while at the same time stretching available help by eliminating duplication of services. Whereas all citizens should become more aware of the needs of their neighbors, of the efforts within the community to address those needs in a caring and responsible way, and of the opportunities to lend their support to these efforts. Now, therefore, the Herington City Commission does hereby proclaim the week of April 29th to May 6, 2018, as Hope Center Emphasis Week in the city of Herington, to celebrate and recognize more than a quarter century of hope of the Hope Center, or of work of the Hope Center, and call all citizens, community agencies, religious organizations, and business to a greater recognition of the needs of their neighbors.
I move that we pass the proclamation for the Hope Center proclaiming Hope. The week of April 29th to May 6th is the Hope Center Emphasis Week.
Second.
Discussion? Brenda?
Commissioner Bill?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawks?
Aye.
Commissioner Nessler? Aye. Commissioner Hager?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Buck Driggs. How we doing, Buck?
Good, how are you guys?
Wonderful.
Here tonight to give you an update on where your water treatment plant stands as far as the design work that we are working on for future improvements. It's been pretty busy. We've been, I guess about 4 to 6 weeks ago, we met with 2 different ozone manufacturers. They both had different products. Listened to what their sales pitch were. This is kind of a part of the process of our ozone selection. What we're going to do is pre-select those components of the project. That way we get what we want versus having to go through a low bid type process. There's Chad, our wastewater guru, is putting together some solicitation packages based on what we've heard to solicit proposals, to see what kind of cost would be involved and what products we like the best. And from that information, what we'll do is identify who we think best fits your system, your water, and we'll run a pilot project with that on using your water. So we'll take your water, sample of it, run a pilot project, see how it works with their equipment, and ultimately what we're going to do is select the components that we want and inspect those in our project and make whatever contractor gets the low bid use those components. So kind of been working on that. We've also been working on the analysis for the filter basins, trying to figure out the right sizing that they want. This kind of dictates a little bit about footprint of a building that we're going to be putting up to house the filters. We had started out putting some floor plans together. I think we got a little cart ahead of the horse a little bit. We need to figure out that. We need to figure out how much room the ozone equipment's going to take up in the building. A lot of that dictates on which ozone product we go with. It's surprising the same equipment one had quite a bit of sprawl to it per se, and the other was a little more compact. So those are things that we'll take into account when we get the proposals and look at things and so forth. But trying to nail down some of those answers so we can finalize up a little bit more the floor plan of the building. We do have structural guys that are doing the footings and whatnot for the settling basin, working on wall sections, what that's going to look like, how it's going to connect to what's there. We've also reached out to the Historical Society to begin collecting historical information about the plant. As you may recall, that was one of the SHPO requirements that came out as a part of the historical review, is they want us to build some exhibits. And I guess that sounds a pretty fancy word, but we'll build some pictures and some photos that replicate the history, show a little bit of the history of the Herington power and electric plant to kind of satisfy their requirements of keeping that thing within the community. So we've reached out to them. They're supposed to be sending us what they have, that information, and we'll put it in some boards and I'll share that with you as well. What else do we got going on? We've got some demo plans started, we've got a fencing plan started. The electrical building, I guess, is probably the big thing that we've been pretty much ready to wrap up. I'd say by the end of the month we'll have probably 95% plans and specs. The only thing that we're really missing in that is the other 5% is sending it to USDA, making sure they approve everything, they look at everything. We've shared that stuff with Mike Schmidler, and we talked a little bit with your folks about building a layout. I've met with or talked with your zoning guy, you know, the setbacks and stuff. There is a little bit of some goofiness within that between, you guys have adopted the international zoning code, and there's a Herington zoning code, and they kind of conflict with each other as far as the setback. I think the one setback in the Herington building code is 25 feet from the property line, and the international building code calls for 5 feet, and we're 10 or 15 feet off the property line of the building. So we're kind of in the middle, but just to give you a heads up on that, I've talked with your zoning person and we kind of worked through that, and they're okay. They will approve, I guess, what we've got shown. So we did move our building a little bit further away from where we had it before because there were some gates over there. But we talked with your guys and with Mike Schmidler, and I think everybody's in agreement on that. We did get a contract from Mike and Midstate Energy Works to do the work. I sent that to a couple of your staff members, but we did send it on to USDA. Their number is less than what we had budgeted, so that's good news. We're trying to figure out how to get that integrated into the project and the USDA stuff. Originally, they said it was under $150,000, and it was specific work, pretty much can only be done by specific people, and we were able to fast track it through and hire them through a contract and whatnot, so I got that. Then along comes another reviewer, a little higher up on the chain, and now they're questioning whether they can really do that or not. So I was gonna present that to you tonight, but I decided to hold off, because I don't want their number out there floating around if we truly have to go through a selection process. So, we're reading through that. I talked with Mike today to get some more information to help us out. If that is the case, then what we'll do is we'll pre-select that as well. We'll go through a selection process based on proposals that's submitted, and probably ultimately end up at the same place we're at, but there may be a process we have to go through. Their stuff is pretty specialized, and obviously their knowledge of working on your infrastructure for the last 30+ years probably holds quite a bit of weight in the selection process, but, so we're still working through the details of that. I talked with Brad earlier, and I've talked with Brenda a couple different times now about trying to make sure we have funding in place or financing for the electrical side of it. It's kind of a short-term financing until we roll all that into the USDA loan, which will be done, probably a year down the road, or when we close out the project. So, and I think it sounds like maybe some of that's on the agenda tonight. It sounds to me like you guys are in pretty good shape with that, so I feel pretty comfortable with that. By the time we get there, you're gonna have your end wrapped up, and we should be in good shape. But right now, we're looking at having those plans out, I would say 1st of July for bidding electrical stuff, with construction to follow shortly thereafter. So, and then we'll have final plans we're still looking at trying to have done for the plant in late October. And then again, they'll go through some review after that, USDA and KDHE and whatnot, to get our final approval to move forward with construction.
You had mentioned water testing. Now, we have more problems in some areas than others. Is that going to be taken into account as far as where those samples are taken, to run them through the ozone filters to see how it addresses our particular concern?
Yep, I think so. And I guess with everything, there's always a different approach. And it's even interesting to hear the manufacturers talk about where they place their equipment, whether it's, coming in from the raw water line, or whether it's after the filters. And both of them have a little different philosophy based on their equipment. So, but yeah, overall, our goal is to reduce the trihalomethanes to where we're in compliance and way below compliance, not just get below, but to get way down there. So that I think some future level of 40 is what they were talking may be required. That's the next wave of, oh my gosh, are they going to do this? And we're going to be under that number.
Yeah, we want to make sure that this is a water plant that, 20, 30 years from now, we're not.
Yep. Nope, that's
Trying to
exactly
figure
our
out
goal
the
as well.
next one.
I did, I know Chelsea was here maybe 2-3 weeks ago or something. I talked to you guys a little bit more about wrapping up some loan stuff and whatnot. It sounded to me like you guys maybe talked to her about adding some stuff to the project, maybe some pumps out by the lake.
That was one of the things that had been discussed, but we've got one inoperable pump, right, Brenda?
2.
2? How many pumps are out there?
It's not reliable, they're worried about it.
How many pumps are out there?
I think 3. And so, one's not working, the other one's not great.
So I would say we can easily look at that. Yeah, we've got some things in there that can help you guys probably with that. So let us kind of keep moving here, and we won't forget it. We can have that discussion down the road on whether we want to put those in this package or not. Hopefully that half a pump that's out there or whatever it is lasts for another year or so till we can get things bid and so forth.
I'm still trying to get over the translation of we have half a back.
They're worried about it. It works, but they're worried about it. So
Now I
I
have
have
to-
2, but I say 1.5.
Maybe, maybe we need more now. Maybe a couple later, I don't know.
Okay. Anybody
That's,
else? I'm sorry, go ahead.
any other questions or?
Only other question I had was looking through the finances this month. I saw that there was, and we see them every once in a while, checks to Buck Driggs Design. Is that out of the overall total, or is that in addition to? Because
That is out of our engineering services contract.
okay,
was
so that is
approved
part of the overall
Yep.
3.5. Okay.
Yep.
We're just paying ahead. We're not paying
No,
ahead, but we're.
yeah, we've done our geotechnical work, we've done the environmental, we've got the survey work, we've got structural folks have already done all the structural analysis on the electrical building. The architect's done probably 70% of that. They've got MEP folks as well. We've got Lochner that's doing a lot of the sizing and the analysis. We've done the ozone. So, yeah, that's kind of, there's a lot going on right now.
Oh, I believe it. I just want to make sure that that wasn't in addition to what we've already been talking. We're just knocking out things that
Yep,
we've already talked
yep,
about.
this is, everything's been under budget, everything we talked about, so.
Outstanding.
Yep, that's the plan.
Anything else? Thanks, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good evening.
Debbie, here to discuss the advisory boards to include discussion of Herington Housing Authority. How we doing, Debbie?
Good, how are you?
Wonderful.
I'm with the Herington Housing Authority, and I appreciate you letting me be here to speak to you tonight. Robin knows me as a more anxious kind of citizen that likes to come up and ask a lot of questions. But I've grown since then. I'm not going to be as anxious tonight.
I appreciate that.
I knew you would. Before I start, I just want to say I'm in full support of the transparent government. I am in full support of citizens having a right to voice opinions and voice concerns to their officials. I fully support the Kansas Open Meetings Act, the Kansas Open Records Act, and the Freedom of Information Act. But I also believe that in order for Herington to flourish, we must work on our perceptions and the expressions of the city that we are referring to as our home. In preparing for today, I was looking over some of the city ordinances, and I'm going to start with advisory boards before I get into the housing stuff, because that's kind of more intricate. But when I was looking over some of the ordinances, I noticed that some of the city boards are listed as advisory boards. Some of those boards are not listed as advisory boards. And so my question was, when I think of an advisory board, I think about an informal committee that gathers and gets a bunch of information together, and then they bring it to the city commission and say, here's what we found out, we're coming to you for a recommendation or to make a determination. Is that what our advisory boards do, or do they actually make their own determinations in the meetings? Because I rarely hear a board come to the city that's an advisory board seeking authorizations or something like that. So this is just my own confusion, I'm just curious of how the advisory boards work.
Well, I'll give you my 2 cents, and everybody else can jump on top of me and correct whatever I say that's wrong.
Okay.
If there's any money attached to it, or there's long-term decisions related to policy, anything like that, it has to come to the commission.
Okay.
But a lot of the smaller decisions or things that don't directly, they're not directly tied to taxpayer funds, they're empowered to take care of some of those things without going back to the commission.
Okay.
Does that sound like a safe answer, or a good answer, Brad? I mean, case in point would be the CVB. There's bed tax dollars there that are generated specifically for convention and tourism, and we count on the CVB as our advisory board to figure out where best to put those monies. But they still have to develop a budget and bring it to the commission for approval before they can do anything with any money that we give them.
So then the ones that are not listed advisory, they're just out there on their own?
Well, another case in point would be like Lake Advisory Board. The CVB here recently wanted to purchase some fire pits. We referred them back to the Lake Advisory Board, saying, hey, if you're gonna purchase fire pits, you need to go talk to the Lake Advisory Board and make sure that the fire pits you're recommending we buy meet expectations out there, they're usable, they work with a CAM post, talk to the city, make sure we don't have concerns with, you're gonna bolt them down, but we don't want them bolted down, or, you know, so we do count on those advisory boards, some, on things like that, but, yeah, a lot of things they do on their own, they don't have to come back to the commission.
Okay. Do you have rules for the advisory boards? Are there, I mean, does the city have like, this is what we would like to see, this type of behavior, or this kind of action, or do they make their own within their boards?
Beyond what's identified in the code book, I don't think that we have anything in writing right now that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you. I was going to discuss a public expressions policy and recommend that might be something that would help the city, but I see tonight there's one sitting out, and so we get to scratch that whole part of my meeting. I was very glad to see that that was there. I know that, we've been watching a lot of things on YouTube, and our meetings are being recorded, and I think that that's a wonderful thing. But I also wanted to know if there are rules enforced that the city could maybe put into place for the people that are recording, so that citizens have some protection. A couple of things that I've seen online sometimes is that the machine's not turned off when you go to recess. And my opinion of the Kansas Open Meetings Act is that when you're in recess, the meeting is ended. That's why it stops, and that's why you say we will come back at X time, and you wait until X time so that everyone can return. But when the recording's running, citizens might not know that, and I've heard some very personal, disturbing things being stated on YouTube that I don't think the citizen knew was actually being recorded. And so COMA allows that the city adopt reasonable rules relating to videotaping your meetings. And I wondered if the the commission would consider some reasonable rules, one of which being, please turn it off during recess.
Any thoughts on that?
We have to.
Who's that? Who's responsible for taping it? It's not ours.
Mm-mm.
It's not ours.
No. But you could set rules for anyone that's taping it so that,
I contacted Vive to see if there was a way to get the public channel back. He was leaving on vacation and would be back, I think, next week. And he was gonna check on that for us, and then if that happens, then we can have somebody record ourselves, and then we'll post it on there instead of having it on Facebook.
and there may still be citizens that still want to record on their own.
Can't stop it.
And I understand they're able to, and they can post all of that. I just want a little more protection as a citizen when I'm sitting in a meeting. If I got kind of cheeky and said something derogatory, I really don't want that on YouTube. I mean, it's embarrassing, and the things I heard were very personal about a family's personal situation. And it just concerned me listening to that on YouTube.
No, absolutely, and your point is well taken. The only concern I would have with, because as you said, when we go into executive session, the meeting up here effectively is paused. So then we're setting rules for what private citizens can and cannot do outside of a meeting. However, having said that, I'll also say that if somebody is recording your conversation and has not informed you that your conversation is being recorded, and then later they publish that conversation, they are liable.
That was a concern that I
By
had.
putting that video out there on wherever it goes on, if they're recording you without your permission outside of an open meeting act, and you say something and you decide you want to sue, that's not a COMA problem, that's you going after whoever recorded you against your consent.
One way that it was put to me is just because I've walked into this meeting, I'm in a Kansas open meeting. The Open Meeting Act applies, and I understand that, but I don't think it necessarily applies when the recess is going on.
Oh, you're absolutely
And just because
correct.
I've walked in here, I don't expect I'm gonna be recorded personally.
And that's kind of my point, though, is when we go into executive session, that person needs to state, the recorder's still running and I'm recording you.
Okay.
If they don't, then they're recording you unknowingly or unwillingly. Is that correct, Brad?
Yes, no, and maybe.
That's what I said.
There are a number of permutations to the answer. And in an open meeting setting, just because it's an open meeting, it's not a free-for-all either. The ability for us, for example, if we institutionalize a recording, to eliminate other recordings in the room during an open meeting does exist because we are preserving it in full. And then we absolutely can control turning it on and off at the appropriate time, which is what Debbie's concern is, and I agree with that. And we can establish those standards. We have never done it. So far, we've just allowed citizens to go ahead and record. My purpose in asking Brenda to check is in a lot of the municipalities that I work with, they have a public access channel. They record every meeting. The whole thing is on, it's on live. It's also something they can play back whenever they want because it's recorded in such fashion. And then we also have to, at that point, set certain standards as to open records requests for that particular kind of thing and how that's done. And if it in fact is, if you record a meeting and you do it simply for the, in a particular case, the city clerk, to be able to be accurate with minutes, but it's not necessarily treated as part of your policy, an ongoing record that you keep for purposes of open records. It impacts whether it is accessible. And because if we just do it till the minutes are approved for the next meeting, this is just an example. At that point, we don't have to maintain them. Some cities do, some don't. And that has an impact on what's available after the fact. So, but there's a fair amount that goes into it, and setting up a comprehensive policy is a good idea, I think, for some of the reasons that were just suggested in terms of concerns about who's recording what, when, and how, and if it's done under the auspices of an open meeting, or somebody walking down the street reporting everybody as they go by. That's become more prevalent because every phone does it anymore in terms of smartphones. So get into a lot of elements to that and what ifs.
I definitely get where the maybe comes from.
That's our favorite legal word, maybe. Okay. And then I wanted to discuss our Open Records Act. I just wondered if we had a Freedom of Information officer that's different than our interim city manager who is trained in the areas of releasing information to the public. And the reason I'm asking is these are really daunting tasks. There are 55 types of records that do not have to be released to the public by law. And I think there should be maybe a reference sheet or something so that we're not trying to remember what do we have to give, what do we not. I'm also concerned about who is allowed to come request records under the auspice of it being free. Does any board member, any board member allowed to walk into the city building and request any information they want because they're a board member and expect that to be free? And if they do, then I would like to know if it's possible the city institute some rules or guidelines that maybe if a board wants information from the city, they should discuss that in their meeting and vote on it, and the chairperson brings the request to the city. The reason for that is it would be very easy to distinction what is a personal request that you really need to be charged for, and what's a business request that we're doing to help our city. And I think there's a big difference. I've been on the receiving end of the information requests, and it very much disrupts our business office when you are so small. Our city clerk is city clerk, finance directors, interim city manager, do-good overall kind of person, and that's fantastic. But there can be a time that this can become really detrimental to what's trying to be done within our community. And then the word goes out on the street how horrible we are because we just don't allow. And it's not that we don't allow, but I think that our city has gone through so many changes, we must be reasonable. There has to be a time for our city to get together and join hands, settle, and then if there's a problem, then let's go after that. But we really need to settle because we seem very tense and out there right now. So that's basically all I wanted to know on those acts before I hit the Housing Authority. And I appreciate if you would consider either one of those options, possibly some rules or something to help out.
As far as an open records policy, I know we do have one. I don't know what reference number or anything off the top of my head would be, but
Resolution 646.
yes, that's Resolution 646 relates to our open records policy, and we do have one in place as far as getting those records without charge. If you're on a board and you're requesting records about that board through the chair for that board, then there would be no charge, because in most cases, the city staff is the support staff for that board. But that means it's coming for the board, through the board, to the city. If, just because you're on this board and you want information about this board, they're not your support staff, so you submit an open records request and you're charged just like anybody else walking in off the street asking for those records.
Okay.
And we still have to, and you're right, there is a lot of time involved, and I don't think people understand how many hours are spent
Well, and it just
putting that
gets real
information
testy.
together and making it available.
Yeah, the redaction of information, people's name, I mean, it's, it's so legal. And it's easy to miss things and nobody means to, but it just happens.
Yeah, and it would be nice if we had something in place that only the chair could come in and request things, because that isn't what's happening. And then I'll call the chair and they have no idea why this person is in here.
Right.
And that's been an issue.
And candidly, you do not right now have any exception as, in terms of what the mayor was saying, no. Anybody that walks in requesting records is charged for them under that resolution, period. No
Even
matter
if-
what their
Oh,
purpose.
even a board member?
Even if they're,
That's the way it reads. I'm not saying, in terms of a policy, how it's been observed, I'm just telling you how it's written.
We did
Even
have
though-
an issue come up once.
even though some of the not the resolutions, the ordinance establishing as boards establishes the city staff as the
Even
support
though,
staff for
yeah.
that board. Really?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't make a but-for exception in there at all. It's, it mirrors the AG's open records requests and their standard.
So it sounds like we need to go back and review resolution 646 and,
Yeah, I mean, it's written in a way, the more exceptions you create, the more problems you can potentially have. So it's been done to, as a straight up, this is, and again, there's latitude. The records custodian, if it's one page and it's readily accessible and something they have sitting on their desk, they may not charge. Now, is that appropriate based on the resolution? No, but has that been done that way on occasion? Yes, but generally speaking, anything above and beyond that, the expectation in that resolution is that it's done that way, because if you don't, when you make an exception in one case, where do you stop? And who do you treat differently?
so again, it still sounds like we need to go back and review resolution 646 and clarify, and then follow our own resolution to the letter. Any other comments or input?
The other one under Kansas law, just because I've been asked this a number of times, indigency does not assist you. If someone is, wants open records and they say they can't afford them, it is not an exception in Kansas. It is in the federal system, of freedom of information. You can establish that you are unable to afford it, therefore a waiver can be established. But that's an affidavit and a number of things that go into that. It's not the case with records through the city that observe the state open records request.
Okay. Anything else, Brenda? Great points, Debbie, thank you.
Now I'm gonna move to the housing authority.
Switching hats.
Switching hats, I came today because I watched a video and I heard an audience member ask the commission, who owns the housing authority? And no answer came. And so tonight I came to enlighten everyone. We were formed under the municipal housing law. The statute's KSA 172340. That resolution, the city did resolution 179, and it is dated December 7th, 1971. That resolution created an agent of the city designated Herington Housing, or Housing Authority of the City of Herington. It delegated the powers thereto and authorized the employment of personnel. The powers were limited in that resolution. They gave us all of the powers with exception to the power to execute contracts with an agency of government, borrow money, issue bonds, and acquire or dispose of real property. And that was when the housing authority was set up. On January 11th of 1972, the city did another resolution, and it is resolution 180. That resolution provided for the cooperation in development and the operation of low-rent housing projects. It also set the acceptance of the pilot payment in lieu of personal property taxes. And so we had that resolution to cooperate in the development of the properties. In 1976, Golden Age Homes was wanting to be built, and so discussions were had with the government, and HUD came to the city and said, you need to open this up and remove the restrictions so that they can enter into contracts with the government. Otherwise, that would have had to come directly to the city. So on August 3rd, the resolution number 236 in 1976 was made amending the section of the resolution 179 which determined our authority and our power. That amended area gave us all of the powers in the municipal housing code, but applied it only to the Golden Age Homes project, because at that time that was the only project there was. Okay? In 1981, we decided we need another property and we were going to build Herington Heights. So HUD again, in February of 1981, requested that the city redo the resolution And they requested that the authority be extended to our new project, which was now referred to as Herington Heights. And that was project number KS 101. So that we could develop that property. In response, on March 3rd of 1981, the city performed Resolution 352, and that resolution determined the financial authority of the Herington Housing Authority. That resolution gave us all power to delegate, plan, construct, maintain, operate, and manage any housing project of the city of Herington, Kansas, to enter into agreements and other government agencies, and to borrow money under government sponsorship, and to acquire and dispose of real property. I have those signed resolutions if the city doesn't, because I know there's been issues with not being able to find them before. Which brings us to current. The Herington Housing Authority now owns and operates Golden Age Homes, which is a 24-unit property. There's a clubhouse and a maintenance shed. There's a maintenance shop located at 19 North 14th Street that the Herington Housing Authority also owns. For the Herington Housing Authority, the organizational chart is the Board of Commissioners for Housing, the Executive Director, the Office Manager, and the Service Maintenance Staff. We made a decision as the Herington Housing Authority to convert 40 of our units to the rental demonstration program. This was a program that was developed by HUD only for public housing because there was a drop in funds available. We had capital needs are backlogged throughout the nation, and housing stock was really falling. HUD's answer was RAD. The main reason they came up with RAD is it's more of a privatization of housing, in that HUD allowed public housing authorities to remove HUD's interest in the property by releasing the declarations of trust on the lands so that we could privately acquire money to develop our housing agencies. This was the decision we made. It took a long time. It took well over 5 years. In order to do this and insulate or protect the housing authority, in 2014 we created 3 additional companies. The first company we created was a 501c3 known as Herington Community Housing Incorporated. That's a non-for-profit agency. It is recognized by the state, and we do all of our reporting to the state. We have a number of documents that would show you how that came to play, and you're welcome to see any of those at any time. The Herington Community Housing Authority is governed by the Board of Directors, which is separate from the Housing Commissioners, except that when they did Herington Community Housing, in their organizational minutes, they stated that the Herington Community Housing Board, which is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, those board members would consist of the same board members as the Herington Housing Authority. We also created a general partnership, which was Herington Heights General Partnership, LLC. They were put in place to act as a general partner in the development process. The limited partnership, the third company, is Herington Heights Development Limited Partnership. It was made to establish a limited partnership to carry out the same mission as the general partnership. It's very important to emphasize that our contract currently with HUD for the Herington Heights 1, 2, and 3 properties is not between the Herington Housing Authority and HUD. It is between Herington Heights Development LP and HUD, because that is now the owner of the Herington Heights property based on the way HUD has set up the RAD transaction. For these reasons, I gave you a 79-page PowerPoint that you probably all thought, what is she doing to me? These pages I gave you just for credence of what I'm telling you. I know it's hard to swallow, and I know it's hard to kind of track what happened, but on these documents, back in the back, it will start talking about how the limited partnership owns the properties now. There are investors in, there are general partners, there are limited partners, And we're not under the auspice of the Herington Housing Authority anymore because we didn't want anything to ever happen to the Housing Authority that would ever go away. So for now, we entered into a ground lease. The Herington Housing Authority entered into a ground lease for 99 years as the landlord with Herington Heights Development LP. There is also a leasehold subordinate mortgage and a security agreement financing statement for a $500,000 loan. The original principal amount of the loan was $1,390,000. The ownership structure for Herington Heights properties is now the structure I gave you on the second page. The owner of Herington Heights Development LP, that is made up of the general partnership, which is Herington Heights. You'll see we own a little tiny 1%, 0.01%. You will notice our syndicator, who is the money person, owns 99.9%. They are the determining factor on what happens with that property. They are the ones that invested the money. It was done through low-income housing tax credits. We achieved about a $5 million turnaround on the low-income housing tax credits. We received a grant for $500,000. In addition, we also received a $320,000 grant. So none of this money came from the city or subsidies from HUD. This is strictly for grants available to public housing, housing authorities, etc. So the Herington Heights General Partnership is comprised of Herington Community Housing, which is our company. You will notice it says we're a member and we have 51% ownership. Housing Solutions Alliance Services is the managing member of Herington Community Housing Incorporated, our 501c3, of Herington Heights GP. So the managing member with 49% ownership makes most all the determinations about the property. And that person is Housing Solutions Alliance. They have done this for many years and this is what they do. So when things happen on Herington Heights, we don't go to our board now. We have to go to a management company that was hired because of the investment. The request came from the investor because they're investing a lot of money into our property. We didn't have low-income housing tax credit experience. So we said, we're welcome, we're happy to bring on some professionals, let's do that. So they will train us for a period of time and then we will take over as the management agency. So Young Management has been hired as the property management company for Herington Heights. They in turn did a sub-management contract back to the Herington Housing Authority. This is a form of income for us and how we can make money through other services. We have several layers of funding for this property. I've already mentioned most of them: tax credits, housing trust fund, affordable housing program, and multifamily housing subsidy contract. Each level of funding that we have on this property has its own rules and regulations for compliance, and we have to kind of marry them all together in the way that's prescribed by HUD to make everything work appropriately. With the changes that we have made to facilitate the public housing to the rental assistant demonstration, it was important for me to come here and help explain the ownership and how this is now set up, because you all set our board for our housing commission. You've always provided a stable board for a housing authority through the years, and we're very appreciative, and I do believe it lends credence to the overall success of the housing authority as we know it today. And so for that, we do want to say thank you. In the continued development of housing, it's very prudent to encourage participation for those interested in a positive sustainability of housing in Herington. We encourage focus on business at hand, to comply with deadlines for submission of documents, have the capacity to understand the financial documents and budgets, and grasp the concepts of our business structure, while deciphering the contracts and the complex federal and state rules and setting course for future growth. Since our particular board does make binding decisions without consultation or experience of our city commission and city attorney, it's very critical to develop and retain productive board members who have the ability to utilize their personal and professional development for the best outcome of our community. So in explaining how our articles of incorporation are written, in that the Housing Authority Board is also the Housing Authority Board of Directors for our 501c3, We are wondering if it was reasonable to request of the city that when someone makes application to sit on the Herington Housing Authority Board, that they are also, those applications are given to the Herington Housing Authority Board to determine their need on both of these boards and give some recommendation or feedback. These boards are it's a very intense board. We have a lot of money that will be coming into the Housing Authority because we did our own development. We were a partner in the development. As a partner of development, we will receive development fees in about the amount of around $700,000. That will come into our nonprofit agency. Although this money is not monitored by HUD in how it's being spent, the Herington Housing Authority is well aware that this is for the purpose of housing in Herington. And our goal is to improve housing and to keep improving housing. Kansas statute 172346 speaks to the view about housing in a municipality. The policy of the state is that each municipality shall manage and operate its housing projects in an efficient manner so as to enable it to fix the rentals or payments for dwelling accommodations at low rates, consistent with providing decent, safe, and sanitary dwelling accommodations for persons of low income, and that no municipality shall construct or operate any housing for profit or as a source of revenue to the municipality. This is the service the Herington Housing Authority provides for our city, which is why we were created initially. So in closing, I would like to ask if the city would become more active in the promotion of your housing authority. Although you don't own us, we were created by you for the betterment of the community of Herington. We would like a little bit of promotion from the city. Most of the promotion now, when I go on the city websites, it's all directed towards city-owned housing. And while that's fine, you're not really supporting what you've created, and I would like to see a little more support with that. We would like to be included on the city website as a service. We provide housing services for our community and are the biggest provider of those housing services in our community, but we are not mentioned on your website. The only place we are mentioned is under the codes in where it says the Housing Authority has a board, and this is what they do. But other than that, people can't come to the city website and go, oh, they do have a housing authority. A lot of people don't know that maybe the Hilltop is by income or not. That's not really clear when you just see Hilltop Apartments. Housing authority means something to everyone, and it means low-income housing, and it's there for the purposes that have been set out. So we would just like to be included in the city's promotion of housing. We're partners in this development of housing in our community, and it's something that we are very, very proud of. And we just want the city to share in some of that with us. If you have any questions on how this is now developed, put together, if you want to see legal documents, if there is anything you ever want to come see, I will be happy to provide it. There are a plethora.
Are you guys building more houses? Or are you
Not right now.
just remodeling now?
Right now, we've completed the construction rehab at Harrington Heights properties. All three are done. We are now speaking with our development partner. We want to try to find funding to develop Golden Age homes and bring it up to current status. After that's finished, we do have vacant land we would like to develop, some maybe 3 bedrooms on, maybe something with garages or something a little different or extra. But as a housing authority, we have the ability to acquire money that the city can't. Even your own, housing facilities can't necessarily acquire the type of funds that housing authority can, which is why we are named as your housing agencies. And we do want to help, and we do want to be able to provide and become partners, and we just wanted to let you know that's what we would like to see happen.
Did you or have you gonna have an open house on some of the stuff you remodeled or?
We're going to have an open house right now. Our grass is growing.
Yeah.
It would be detrimental to people chomping on our lawn.
That'll help
There was a growing issue.
Yes, we have quite a few applications in. The process is a little more stringent to approve people because it's a tax credit property. So the people we answer to is the IRS, and it just doesn't get much more strict than that. So they have to follow their guidelines, and we have been able to get the people that have come in approved. It just takes a little bit longer to make sure we have all of the right requirements and that they will meet the guidelines. That's
Thank you.
long, but that's all I had to say.
All right, so, thank you, Debbie. I got two things out of that. Well, I got a lot more than that. Two things you need from us. Information on the website, promotion of the Herington Housing Authority, which I think is absolutely reasonable, realistic, and we should be doing it, and you're right. And the second thing, applicant review, anybody that's appointed to the Herington Housing Authority, basically you're asking for an endorsement or input from that board on who.
Like I don't know how you would call it, but the board, you know, they make all our determinations, so it would be them that would view whatever applications, and recommendation, I guess, is a good word, to let you know, because sometimes, you know, you need we might need a financial person. Or we might need, you know, somebody more skilled in engineering or something. And right now our board is very well put together, but because of the financial status and so much money coming in, there is concern with the expenditures of money when we really need a board put together that is cognizant of longevity and housing for a very long time, so that money just doesn't walk away in short order also.
I think it's a very reasonable request, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't, from a legality standpoint,
No, we can do that.
just any time we get a.
Well, we talked about that tonight, and we were wondering, I was gonna kinda talk to you about it. Would you rather have the applications there, and then as you get them, you guys, then you can bring all of them here and make your recommendation?
Whatever is easier for it. Sometimes I think it's easier to have them both places.
Yeah.
We offer the commissioner's interest form on our website,
Okay.
but if they're here and somebody's just thinking board, they might automatically come here and not think to go to the housing authority, but I always have them at the housing authority also, and I am more than happy to give them out. I will meet with people if they're just interested and wanna know, hey, how does this work? What do you guys do out there? You know, a lot of times they think we just rent apartments and have lunch, and I wish. But, you know, it's a lot more detailed, and our board is very strapped, and they are very busy, and they are very, very good to go over these documents and make the really good decisions that they've been making. I'm very proud to have them as my board.
Yeah, they do a great job, and your points are well taken.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you.
Number 10, consider appointment of one member to the Herington Housing Authority to fill an unexpired term to expire December 31st, 2019.
This is a correction.
Yes, it was on the last, but it
I
was
about died.
being
I
redone.
about
so
died.
Take two.
I about died. I about